as my intro. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have I'm going to talk in three parts, and I've got notes here. I'm not going to read the notes, but they're just to give me a clue what I'm going to say. And the first note is art and beer. The second note is philosophy. The second note is philosophy and religion. And the third note is food jokes. This is something I think you'd be interested in. I just got this online. This is reading glasses. It's like a credit card, see? And it comes out like this. And then it just clips on like this. And you can read with it. No, they're just like regular glasses. Yeah. Beer, art, and philosophy, okay. How many people believe in telekinesis? Raise my hand. You know, you probably watched the inauguration on TV of Donald Trump, and they used two Bibles because they were afraid one of them would burst into flames. And Kellyanne Conway invented alternative facts, and talking to her is like opening a door and that door handle comes off in your hand. Jeff Sessions, you know, the 200-year-old cracker, he lied, you know. And then and the liberal Democrats won't ever use the word lie. They always say untruth or something else like that, you know. So this morning I'm reading the new New Yorker magazine, and there's a review of a new movie that just came out called Kong, Skull Island. And Anthony Lane is the movie critic who writes about it. And so my wife is reading the New York Times, and I'm reading the San Francisco Chronicle, and I always finish much sooner than she does because the Chronicle is only 4 pages long, you know. So this is a quote that I was reading in there, and she thought I was talking about Donald Trump, and it's about this movie, you know, it's kind of a modern King Kong movie. It says, not to give the game away, a large primate who has made absolutely no effort to meet with his therapist, and neither the ride nor the film will be content until you go, in the richest sense of the phrase, apeshit. This room has a great feng shui. It has great proportions, you know. So the universe is really present in the form of proportion in this room, you know. And I've noticed that everything in this room is gradually turning yellow, and you'll notice it in a few minutes. And so. This is a quote from Henry David Thoreau. He says, the gods are looking down on the people in the tavern. That's a real quote from him. Confucius said, is it not delightful to have friends coming from distant quarters? And I have an artist club every Wednesday that people come, and that's how I feel about what Confucius said. Yeah. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a first-generation conceptual artist. That's, you know, like from the late 60s and the early 70s, you know. And conceptual artists are free to work in any medium except painting, you know. But someday I'm going to retire from art and take up painting, you know. And the other two things, the other two works I'm most known for, 1 second sculpture from 1969 where I threw a metal tape measure in the air and it fell to the ground and it existed for 1 second, made a sound and everything, you know. And now that's become a piece that I'm known for. And also the one I'm most known for is the act of drinking beer with friends is the highest form of art, which I did in the Oakland Museum in 1970. And now I've been doing it ever since, literally all around the world. So one time I'm talking to a group and I'm explaining about my beer with friends, you know, and somebody said, I do that all the time with my friends. Is that art? And I said, no, it's a copy of my art. Here's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. He says, beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So one time, the Anchor Steam Beer used to be a sponsor of mine. They would always give beer once a time. And there was a tour one time and of people going through the Anchor Brewing Company, and there was a big vat of beer that a guy climbed up and fell in the vat, and he drowned. So the owner, Fritz Maytag, had to go to the guy's hotel to tell his wife that the guy had drowned. And she says, well, I hope at least he went quick. And he said, no, he got out 3 times to pee. Sometimes when I'm traveling, people ask me, what do you do? And I say, I make psychic sculpture. And they say, what is that? And I say, it'll come to you. So a couple more things about what I do. In the late 60s, I was in the Peace and Freedom Party. And in 1970, I founded the Museum of Conceptual Art. And then I founded the Vision magazine and the Art Orchestra. And I have supported artists. And do you think I'm known for all that? No. And you fuck one sheep. I have a theory that in the 7th year of every decade, the next decade is predicted, you know. So like, for instance, in 1907, Picasso invented Cubism. 1917, Duchamp exhibited his famous urinal called Fountain, and that became the beginning of the Dada era. In 1917, Thomas Hart Benton established the movement called regionalism, which was the art of the 1920s. 1937, FDR, Roosevelt, established the WPA, the Works Project, and that was the beginning of the social realism. 1947, Jackson Pollock did his first drip paintings, first abstract drip painting, and that was the beginning of abstract expressionist painting. 1957, Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg did the first pop art painting, which became the art of the 60s. 1967, Saul LeWitt wrote his famous Sentences on Conceptual Art, and that became the beginning of the conceptual art period, which was the art of the 70s. 1977, Julian Schnabel did his famous broken plate paintings, and that was the beginning of the first Neo period of Neo-Expressionist painting, and painting returned, because the period of the 70s was about more philosophic kind of art, and then in the 80s was art about money, and so then painting returned in the 1980s. 1987, Jeff Koons, who was a neo-pop artist, and it was the next neo movement, and that was the beginning of a kind of return to pop art. In 1997, there was a Belgian artist and a Russian artist who claimed to have invented internet art, and that was the art of the last decade of the first decade of the 21st century. In 2007, I had a show at the Paula Englund Gallery of all circles, and I invented circleism 100 years after Picasso invented cubism. Okay, I need the other glasses for this. I wrote a letter in 2005 to the New York Times, and this gives you a sense of where I'm coming from as an artist. And it was about Marina Abramovich recreating different artists' performances from the 1970s. And so they set it up, and then I go on to say, in the 1970s, I was in performance festivals in Europe with both artists, and they are both great artists, referring to Chris Burden and Marina Abramovich. But I don't blame Mr. Burden for refusing to even discuss with Mr. Abramovich having his work recreated. The performance art of the early 1970s was concrete. We made one-time sculpture actions. If Mr. Burden's work were recreated by another artist, it would be turned into theater, one artist playing the role of another. So, most of these jokes I've stolen and changed and everything, you know. And so it's okay to, if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism, but to steal from many is research. About 15 years ago, the art critic came to my studio to look at my work, and I said, what is your opinion of my work? And he said, it's worthless. And I said, I know, but I'd like to hear it anyway. This is another thing about critics. It's written by Mark. This was written by Mark Twain. He said it's about a recently deceased critic. He says, I did not attend his funeral, but I wrote a nice letter saying I approved of it. So this artist comes home, and he finds that his house has been burned down. And the firemen are there, and he says, what happened? And the fireman says, well, the museum director came to your house, murdered your family, and burned your house down. And the artist says, you mean the museum director came to my house? Video art is a medium because it is neither rare or well done. Here's an interesting quote by Robert Hughes, the great art critic. He said, Jeff Koons is so overexposed that that it loses nothing in reproduction and gains nothing in the original. And this is something I wrote. Men become artists because they want to express their female side, except Richard Serra. So, I don't know, it was about several years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was. I was in the Original Joe's, which is my favorite restaurant in North Beach. It's just up on Union Street in Columbus, you know. And I'm going in there and having lunch with some of my friends. And Bill Clinton is in there at the other end of the restaurant. So I go up to him and I introduce myself and I say, you know, you'd do me a big favor if on your way out you'd say hello to me. And I'd really be a big favor to me and I could really impress my friends, you know. So we're eating lunch. And Bill Clinton comes walking out. He comes right up to my table. And he says, hello, Tom. And I said, not now, Bill. Can't you see I'm eating? Few Germans know this, but Mrs. Hitler used to comb her pussy hair to the right to honor her husband. Is that too much? So this is one of my favorite cartoons that I cut out. It was in the New Yorker about a year ago, and I have to describe it because you can't see it. And it's called Afghanistan Terrorist School, and there's a big sign that says Human Bomb Class, and there's 4 Muslim terrorists. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And so the main guy, the teacher, he's got a bomb strapped to his stomach, and he's holding a detonator in his hand like this, and he says, "Pay attention because I'm only going to do this once, okay?" Okay, this is something serious, and this will be the end of the first section. And this is an artist statement I wrote for an exhibition in the Oakland Museum called "What is Art For?" in 1999. For beauty, for history, for decorating apartments, for people to laugh at, for imitating nature, for therapy, for seeing in a new way, for an educated audience, for enlightenment, for political agendas, for glorifying the church in the Renaissance, for glorifying the state in communism, for glorifying the rich in capitalism, for recording society in a poetic way. So that's the first part of the talk, and then I'm going to tell you the second part. Okay, the second part is philosophy and religion. A philosopher is a person with no job, but he understands why. Can I have an amen? Philosophy has questions that may never be answered. Religion has answers that may never be questioned. The secret to success is always be honest. If you can fake it, you've got it made. I was a child prodigy. At 3, I drew a perfect circle. At 4, I painted like Picasso. At 5, I understood Duchamp. At 5:30, I went down to the bar and had a whiskey and a cigar. Yeah, welcome. Are you the guy that was outside that I told to come in? Okay, thank you. So I have a theory that everybody has an idea of what the point of art is, depending on what they do. For instance, a philosopher's idea about art is that it's something to analyze, A writer usually thinks that the purpose of art is to illustrate stories. So it should be pictorial, it should be representational, because writers think of art as illustration for stories, generally. Not all writers, of course, And architects see art as abstract because they see it as ornamentation for architecture. So everybody has a different idea about what the purpose of art is, So anyway, this guy goes to a Buddhist hot dog stand, and he says, "Make me one with everything." Then he gives the guy a $20 bill, and he waits, and he says, "Where's my change?" And the guy says, "Change comes from within." The French philosopher René Descartes, he goes into a bar, and the guy says, "Would you like a beer?" And he says, "I think not," and he disappeared. I feel sorry for atheists. They have no one to talk to when they're getting a blowjob. Oh, boo. How many Freudian analysts does it take to change a light bulb? 1 to hold the penis. The ladder. I know I'm God because when I pray to him, I realize I'm talking to myself. Yeah, thank you, Jack. So, a missionary was up in Alaska, and an Eskimo says to him, "If I didn't know about God or sin, would I go to hell?" And the priest says, "Not if you didn't know." And he says, "Well, why did you tell me?" Okay, I got a couple of poems here now. I wrote a haiku poem. And one time I read it to Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He asked me if I ever wrote any poetry. I said, "I only wrote one poem." And he said, "Well, I know poets who have made a whole career on one poem, Anyway, so here it is. Haiku poetry has 17 syllables. Tom Marioni. Very didactic, very didactic. So here's another haiku poem. Da Vinci, Duchamp, John Cage, Boyes, and Brancusi, Klein, and Picasso. Now I have all the pictures of these artists on the wall over my bar in my studio. And the reason they're up there is because they all invented something. Leonardo invented automation. Duchamp invented conceptual art. John Cage invented the happening. Joseph Beuys invented social sculpture. Brancusi invented abstract sculpture. Yves Klein invented invisible art. And Picasso invented collage. So I think of them as my teachers, and that's why I hang their pictures up on my studio. Here's a couple of short poems that I wrote. This one's called Movies. Lights, camera, action, cut, print. This one's called TV. This one's called Newsbreak. This is Tom Marioni at 5 and 6 on 7. Film at 11, and now this. Here's some interesting statistics. In the US, 90% believe in God. 40% believe in creationism. 81% believe in heaven and hell. 29% of Republicans believe Obama is a Muslim. I read that somewhere, yeah. About 10 years ago, I was at a concert of John Cage's 4:33, which is 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, that he wrote in 1952. And after about a minute, there's a woman I heard in the stage whisper say, "I still can't hear anything." So in the 1980s, I made several trips to China and Japan. And I studied Chinese calligraphy. I learned how to write a lot of words, not a lot, but the words I like, because I like the way they looked. For instance, when you write music, it's two characters. It's sound and harmony. And it kind of describes, the word is described when you write it, when you read it, And the other one, my favorite, was how you write art in Chinese in a kind of script. The character on the left is beauty, and the one on the right is skill. And I see it as the beauty is female and the skill is male. And it looks like, to me, a man and a woman dancing together, and the man is turning the woman around and her skirt is flowing like that. So when you think of skill and art, it kind of describes what art is, Speaking of art, this Chinese couple was in bed, and the husband says to the wife, "Can we do 69 tonight?" And the wife says, "You mean you want beef and broccoli now?" Okay. Bertrand Russell was lecturing one time on the origin of the universe, and he wanted to know how it was knowable. The woman says, "I know the answer. The universe is resting on a turtle." And he says, "What is the turtle resting on?" And she says, "It's turtles all the way down." A friend said to me the other day, "What is a Freudian slip?" And I said, "Well, it's when you say one thing, but you really mean something else." And he said, "Yeah, that happened to me last week. I was having breakfast with my wife, and I said, 'Please pass the salt.' And instead I said, 'You fucking bitch, you ruined my life.'" The psychiatrist that was a friend of Mickey Mouse's, Mickey Mouse hires him to go and talk to Minnie Mouse to find out, what's going on with her, And so a week later, the psychiatrist comes back to Mickey Mouse and he says, "You're right, Mickey. Minnie is crazy." And he said, "I didn't say she was crazy. I said she was fucking goofy." This is a nice quote from Saul LeWitt, the famous great artist. He says, "Photography makes the grand trivial and the trivial grand." Isn't that true? Down on Mission Street around 11th and Mission, there's a trophy store. I walked in there, I looked around, and I thought, this guy is good. So this reporter from the CNN hears about a guy in Israel who goes to the Wailing Wall every day for 40 years. And so she goes to interview him, and she gets there, and she goes to the Wailing Wall where the guy is praying, and she says to him, What are you doing? And he says, "I'm praying for peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, so my children can grow up in a better world." And she says, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And he says, "I feel like I'm talking to a fucking wall." So this Jewish grandmother, she's in the garment district in New York, and a flasher runs up to her and opens his coat and exposes himself, and she says, "You call that a lining?" That's a classic Jewish joke. I've been reading this book on anti-gravity, and I can't put it down. I'd kill for a Nobel Peace Prize. This actor's doing a terrible job with Hamlet, He's murdering it, and people are throwing fruit at him and booing him and hissing, and he stops, he turns to the audience, he says, "I don't write this crap." Okay, this is something about Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci made art a branch of knowledge rather than an instrument of religion. He wrote a music score based on the sounds do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do that are in syllables in the Italian language and turned them into notes of an octave. Love only makes me remember was the first sentence he wrote that he turned into a musical score. Leonardo was a conceptual artist and the son of God. I'm surprised I have to point this out. You know, this teacher was teaching her children, and she says, there's no language where a double positive is a negative. And the student says, yeah, right. Okay, now this is something serious again here. This is something I wrote in 1991 it was a report on the Central Embarcadero project for the city of San Francisco. Sculpture is about the relationship of forms in space. It should grace the landscape, not be symmetrical. Use the geometry of nature. Have good proportions. Be controversial at first. Become a thing of pride to the public. Have a subject. Make a point. Be symbolic of something, not be generic abstract. It should be sensitive to where it is. Work with its neighboring objects. Emphasize local character. Have a social element. Use shadows. Be a spirit in the dark. It is an object that draws you to it. Has poetry or technological information. Predicts the future. Allows your imagination to travel to the past. It should bring people up to the level of art. Fight against a world of standardization. Have layers of meaning. Be open to interpretation. Not be painted red. A little red goes a long way. It should have more than one side. Not emit obnoxious sounds. Consider acoustics. Reject vandalism. Encourage participation. Okay, thank you. This is the end of part 2, Philosophy and Religion. My favorite. Okay, these notes are about, they're general jokes, and I didn't know what to call them, but there's some jokes about food in here. Since we're all mostly foodies here in San Francisco, there's 3 food critics on the San Francisco Chronicle and only 1 art critic. That's how important food is compared to art in this city. Yeah. So the last time I flew down here from Seattle, and I said I had three pieces of luggage, and I said I want this one to go to Sacramento, and I want this one to go to San Jose, and I want this one to go to San Francisco. And they said, you can't do that. And I said, you did it last week. And then I'm on the airplane, and the stewardess says, in case of air pressure, the oxygen mask will fall down in an emergency for $3. You know why babies cry on airplanes? Because they're unhappy about gay marriage. So anyway, I'm on the airplane, and there's a little boy in the back of me kicking my seat through the whole flight, keeps kicking my seat. And at that point, I was in favor of late-term abortion up to the 5th grade. Back in the 70s, I had a hippie girlfriend, She was into psychedelics and wore tie-dye clothes, and she said, we're one with the universe, we're one body, we're one person, And I says, well, how about paying a little attention to our dick? Oh, boo, yeah. So I saved the good ones for the end. Okay, I saw on TV that for 70 cents you can feed a starving child in Africa, but for $2.99. You can a minute. You can have somebody talk dirty to you on the telephone. So I was thinking that if you had one of the starving children talk dirty to you, you could feed hundreds of them for $2.99. Did you know 42.7% of all statistics are made up on the spot? Why are hemorrhoids called hemorrhoids instead of asteroids? This guy goes into a bar and he announces, all lawyers are assholes. The guy at the end of the bar says, I resent that. And he says, why? Are you a lawyer? And he says, no, I'm an asshole. I want to see beer come out of your noses. A friendship is like peeing on yourself. Everybody can see it, but only you get the warm feeling. Guy goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, you only have 3 minutes to live. And he says, can you do anything for me? He says, I can boil you an egg. So I went in the kitchen, and I asked the chef, how do you prepare your your chickens? And he says, nothing special. I just tell them they're going to die. I just read recently that there are more chickens in the world than there are people. That's true. You know, it was so windy yesterday, I saw a chicken lay the same egg 6 times. These 2 cannibals were eating a clown, and one of them turns to the other and says, does this taste funny to you? About 10 years ago, you know, Mother Teresa died on the same day that Princess Di, you know. And they both went to heaven at the same time, and they're up in heaven, and St. Peter's there. And Mother Teresa says to St. Peter, you know, I ministered to the poor, I did the Lord's work all my life, and they're even talking about making me a saint. And Princess Di was a good person, but I think I did many more works for the Lord than Princess Di did. And I want to know is how come Princess Di has a halo and I don't? And then St. Peter says, that's not a halo, it's a steering wheel. Boo, boo. Is this an audience or an oil painting? So Nun is in the convent. She goes in to tell the Mother Superior that I'm sorry to report that we have a case of syphilis. And the Mother Superior says, oh, I'm so relieved. I was getting so tired of the Chablis. This Polish guy goes to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor says to the Polish guy, can you read the 3rd line down there, the one that says XK3JPSKI? Can you read that? He says, read it, I know him. Patient goes in to see a psychiatrist, and he says, nobody pays any attention to me. The psychiatrist says, next. Guy goes to the doctor, he says, I have 5 penises. And the doctor says, how do your pants fit? He says, like a glove. He gets in the doctor's office, he says, when I sneeze, I have an orgasm. He says, you taking anything for it? And he says, yeah, ground pepper. Now I'm going to say something warm and gracious. Gracious, it's warm in here. Thank you very much. Anybody have anything they want me to say?